iOS and Android have been battling for years at that premium price point and recently going above $1,000. But that battle still wages really strong at the lower end. The entry-level iPhone packs the impressive A13 Bionic processor that can perform at levels better than pretty much any other flagship. This mid-range Samsung touts the beautiful design of the Galaxy S20 series for less than half the price. So OS preference aside, for the same price, which one of these phones is going to give you the absolute most value for your money? This is the 2020 iPhone SE versus the Samsung Galaxy A51. So there's a lot to talk about with these phones, and we'll break them all down by categories, but I think we have to begin with price. So $400 for an entry-level iPhone is a really big deal. Now you can decide for yourself if the corners Apple cut are worth it to you, but when you combine the value and the processor inside, you are getting a very capable phone. So Samsung, on the other hand, has had phones competing at various price points for years, including that really top over $1,000 all the way down to this $400-ish price point. So this A51 line is nothing new. What is new and interesting is that these phones both came to the US within about 2 weeks of each other, and very rarely do we see phones at the same price point announced in the same market at the same time. So it made sense to naturally put these together. Now folks abroad have had access to A51 for about 3 or 4 months, but here in the US it's offered on carriers and it's bringing a lot to the package. Look at the A51, Samsung didn't cut that many corners. In fact, you're getting a lot of flagship features in here. You've got an in-screen fingerprint reader. You've got a full HD AMOLED display. You've got that single hole punch up at the top. And even some things that flagship phones don't even have nowadays, like a headphone jack, are here. But it's not all perfect. There are some notable omissions. Things like wireless charging aren't here as well. And the plastic body in the hand maybe doesn't feel as premium as some of the flagship counterparts. So I think the design of the iPhone SE is maybe a bit controversial. It seems to be split to two camps. People that understand that Apple just reused an iPhone 8 shell to keep costs down, and those that wish Apple would have done something at least new or slightly different or tweaked for this year. But there's no denying the materials that go into this phone make it at least feel premium. The combination of the aluminum and the glass feel really good in the hand. This was a flagship phone just a few years ago. Now, aesthetically, it might not look like a flagship anymore. You've got a 4.7-inch screen, which we will talk about, but you've got big fatty bezels on the top and bottom, and of course a home button being there on the bottom with Touch ID. I'm not sure what side of the fence you're going to fall on with the iPhone SE as far as looking and feeling premium. But it is a tried and true method, and this is sort of the last version of that design phone that has a physical home button. So at the very least, it's the best version of that now older design language. So I still maintain that the reason a lot of people buy phones is for the camera. And you are getting very capable camera systems with both of these. So if we put samples from both of these side by side, the iPhone, it's kind of no surprise, has a fantastic camera. And I'd even say it's almost the same level of still quality you get with the iPhone 11. Apple kind of continues to perfect the smart HDR. So on the A51 side, and Samsung typically, photos tend to have a lot of contrast. The colors kind of pop right off at you. It's not the case here with the A51, and I think that's kind of a good thing. Both phones are pretty similar side by side in good lighting. There's noticeably more contrast and sharpening than the SE, and sometimes the colors would shift a little bit cooler with the Samsung. I think the versatility of the phone here adds to its niceness. The ultra wide is nice to have, although I may not use it all that often. The macro shots, I'm not taking really close pictures all that often. When I want to, it's kind of good to have that flexibility, even if the object was kind of hard to keep in focus. And another area where maybe the whole story isn't told just on paper, you'll see the A51 has a night mode, whereas the iPhone SE does not have Apple's night mode. So you would assume the edge would clearly go to Samsung here. In like the night mode situations though, even where night mode was turned on, both phones performed pretty equally, and that is to say, like, equally bad. If I had to give an edge to one, I'd probably even say the SE could get better focus. The A51 really struggled, even with that night mode, but both of these phones are almost useless in night mode situations. So video is also another area I think is becoming increasingly important. So on the iPhone SE, you can shoot 4K at 60 and 4K at 30 on the A51. And one thing to notice, the A51 does not support stabilization in 4K. Video on the iPhone SE looked great in pretty much every way. So overall, I was pretty impressed with the still capabilities of the A51. Video though, was not very much of a close story. Again, when you look at these video samples side by side, even if I don't tell you which one's on screen, you can tell that one looks clearly better than the other. On a still standpoint, these phones compare very favorably. If you want the best, most versatile sensor, then it's still the iPhone SE. If you want a camera system that can take pictures with various lensing, then the A51 is really good. Video tells a very different story though with these two phones. And I think it sort of plays to Apple's software prowess, what they can do by offering that stabilized 4K 60. Now that might not be an issue for you, maybe take it down to 1080 and they're pretty much on par. But for me though, both of these based on stills and video, I'm giving the edge to the iPhone. So I want to stop for a minute. I know a lot of people, your work life has changed. You're working from home right now if you're fortunate enough to still have a job, and that's kind of where we found ourselves. Usually when we're filming these videos, I've got two editors and producer here, but now I'm filming myself and we had to redo our entire workflow for the business with everybody working remotely. And to sort of best serve and keep us organized, we found Monday.com. So having something like this that lets us collaborate, lets us keep track of projects, assign projects out, can be shared with everybody across the calendars, has been really helpful to keep track of. So a couple cool things about Monday. First, there's an app for pretty much every platform. There's also a ton of integration features with Monday with hundreds of services, things you're probably using all the time. Google Drive, Slack, and a ton more. So obviously we're using this for video production, but I think one of the nice things about Monday is it can adapt to pretty much any industry that you are in. Whether you've got a project you're trying to manage or people you're trying to manage, Monday can adapt to you instead of you having to adapt to the software. So if this sounds like something that you would want to check out that might help you or your business, we'll link to it down below. While camera is a huge determining factor in which phone to get, for me, display is the most important category. It's the portal to pretty much everything that this phone can do. If it's not a good enough display, it can sour the phone for me. So let's start with the iPhone SE. It's a 4.7-inch LCD panel, and technically it's 750p, although that's not really a standard. The actual resolution is 1334 by 750, and it still gets plenty bright, no issues with outdoor visibility. The colors look really bright and vibrant. This is a very, very good LCD panel. Now there are times when things can look a little bit, let's say, chunky, but that is very rare to find. And again, at this price point, that display is not only acceptable, it's on the better side of good. But sort of coming back to design, it's got them big old bezels on the top and bottom, and it's hard to ignore when you look at it next to the A51. And you look at that phone, just the screen on, sitting on a table, it's hard not to think that you're looking at a flagship phone. So it's 6.5 inches, it's FHD+, so it's 1080 by 2400, and everything about it looks some version of good. No issues with brightness. Blacks, of course, look super black. Colors look bright and vibrant. There isn't a crazy high refresh rate here. It's 60 Hertz, just like on the iPhone SE, but this is a beautiful display. This looks and feels like a premium display, and this is probably the biggest area of difference between these two phones, is how good a display is on the Samsung A51. Performance is something that generally we don't talk about too much on flagship phones, but I think is important to talk about on the lower end phones, because these aren't always known for being performance powerhouses. So on the iPhone side, we've got the A13 Bionic. On the Samsung side, we have the Exynos 9611. So before I get there, let's talk about the A13. If you haven't heard it enough, here's a reminder. It's the same processor that's in the iPhone 11 Pro and 11 Pro Max. Multitasking, apps, games, whatever you are doing is going to be just as fast on the SE, at least to me, as it appears to be on the 11 Pro. And while performance on the SE hauled through everything, that wasn't necessarily the case here with the A51. If I had a lot of apps open, I did start to experience some navigation stutters. Now, it wasn't anything that I couldn't get through easily, but it was something I'm not used to seeing on sort of any phone that I've tested recently. So, and don't take any of that to mean that this is a slow phone. With even the most basic app management, you won't notice any sort of stutter or slowdown. I probably do a lot more granular tests than the average user would who's, checking Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram throughout the day. But just know if you don't do any management, you just try to use the phone and open up whatever you're gonna open up and hope it's going to work fine, but you will start to notice some sort of sluggishness and sometimes some slowdown of apps. And so battery life has turned into kind of the Achilles heel of the iPhone SE. It's got a relatively anemic, about 1800-ish milliamp hour battery. A51, certainly a little bit bigger, a little bit thicker, more room, almost doubles that to around 4000 milliamp hours. But we wanted to sort of give these two equal options, equal opportunities to see how they perform. So here's what we did. Charge them up to 100%. Both had cellular networks connected. All other apps were closed, connected to the same Wi-Fi network. And we watched back a lot of hours of our own videos on YouTube. And what we ended up seeing, these results pretty much mimicked a milliamp hour size. The iPhone SE was dead kaput after 6 hours, whereas the A51 went for 12. Now, in real world usage, you're probably not gonna sit there and watch our videos for 6 to 12 hours, although I certainly hope you do, but it does tell a story of how much better battery life is on the A51 than the iPhone SE. And the iPhone SE, it's again thin and light, it's still a day phone for most usage, but it is definitely not a day plus. Whereas A51, you can very easily get through a full day. It might even be a day and a half phone. To say this, you won't have to think about battery with the A51 if you plug it in at night. With the iPhone SE, you're gonna wanna keep an eye on the upper right-hand corner when it gets to be the end of the day. Okay, so that's the key things of these phones. There's a lot of little stuff, the intangibles that make these phones unique, like the biometrics, how you get into your phone. The iPhone SE, it's tried and true, it works, it's Touch ID, but it's fast, it's accurate, and it works pretty much every time, even with me who has sometimes very weird thumbprints evidently. This phone unlocked almost every single time without issue. On the A51 side, they opted for something kind of different, I think more flagship-y. You've got an in-screen fingerprint reader, and it's an optical version. It wasn't quite as accurate for me as it was on Touch ID, but it did mean I got a better looking phone. I didn't have those giant bezels on the top and bottom. And software is always a tricky one, because I feel like it boils down to what OS do you like? So at the iPhone SE, you're getting the latest version of iOS. Right now, as this filming, it's iOS 13 with around 4 to 5 years of software updates. So if we're on 13 now, you should get support for up to iOS 18, which seems very, very far away. So on the Samsung side, you're getting Android 10, and we asked Samsung on the phone how many years you're going to support this. And they said they will guarantee 2 years of software updates. So from Android 10 to whatever Android 12 ends up being called. And you should also get software and security updates for at least 3 years after that. And those should come at the very least quarterly. So you're getting more regular updates for longer on the iPhone side, but you're still getting a lot of update supports on the Android side. As I sort of get to the conclusion here, I feel like there's almost 2 questions that need to be answered. Which is the better phone to buy today, and which is going to be the better phone in 2 or 3 years? And if you want to get a phone that you're only going to keep for a year and you want to spend $400, then either of these are going to give you incredible options. I'd probably say the A51 is a better option to go with. You're getting more flagship, premium, let's say features that you get on the higher cost phones. if you're gonna keep a phone for 3 or 4 years at this price point, very clearly the better way to go is going to be the iPhone SE. If I'm already experiencing some software lag and slowdown now, by the time I get to Android 11 later on this year or Android 12 next year, presumably that's going to be exacerbated. On the iPhone side, that Apple reliability, an Apple software update is something that's really important. Even for those that are OS agnostic and don't care which operating system, knowing your phone will be supported for 4 to 5 years is a giant peace of mind. And I would wager that the iPhone SE will perform faster in 4 years than the A51 will in 4 years. So here's the question for you. If you want the best phone for right now, and you're gonna upgrade in a year, check out the A51. I think you're going to love it. If you wanna keep your phone for longer than a year, you just don't know how long you're gonna keep it for, your best bet is gonna be to go to apple.com, order yourself an iPhone SE. Whew, that was a long one. If you've been watching that video wondering what the shirt says here, 2020 dumpster fire. Hasn't been the best year. And you wanna pick one of these up for yourself, we made them because I wanted to share how I feel about 2020. So if you wanna pick one up, we'll link to it down below.